ask questions. Each question that is brought forward will be asked of each candidate will be given an opportunity to respond. My husband is saying that's what I was going to say, Jackie, so just introduce Father Ian, the pastor here, and get off the stage. So I will. This is our pastor, Father Ian Duffy. We're very, very thrilled to have him. He's new to our parish, but we're gradually getting him into shape. So here it is.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of you. A special welcome to our candidates. It's great to see so many of you here this evening, and wonderful to see our candidates, especially for me, because being new to Guelph, I really don't know any of them, so I'm very much looking forward to what they have to say. In his first letter to St. Timothy, St. Paul says this: "Therefore, I exhort first of all that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings and all who are in high places, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior." We don't have any kings among us, and while I'm sure that we do pray for the Queen, I think I can hope anyway that I can say on behalf of all of us that you who strive to serve in Her Majesty's government will certainly be in our prayers over the next few weeks. And we also pray that all of our fellow countrymen and women will choose wisely, will consider their votes soundly, and that come the 22nd of October, we will have the government that we ought to have in this country, that will serve us well, and that will help us to be strong and free for a good long time to come. Thank you very much, and welcome again.
Just so that you know, we did invite all candidates. The Communist Party candidate was unavailable this evening, and until last night our NDP candidate was going to be here, but she's very tired and asks your indulgence. So thank you, and now over to my worst half, Paul Jeffs.
That's a bit better than being introduced as Jackie's husband. Good evening and welcome. And before we begin, I ought to just do a little housekeeping. For those who are not familiar with the hall, the toilets are at the back, just behind where the water table is. And we are going to continue with a little bit of flexibility until 9:30. That's mainly because that's a little bit past my bedtime. But if the questions are still coming on in, then we will continue until everybody gets up and of their own accord. But we'll try to keep a little bit more structure than that as we go through, depending on how responsive you have been with your questions. And I will just reiterate, because I was going to, and Jackie took my place, that the questions are meant to be directed for all parties, so that we can understand where their vision, where their answers are going to come from, not just directed to one particular party. If you do that, it will make it difficult for the others to respond, perhaps. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. I ought to first explain that this is a question and answer meeting. It's not intended to be a debate where everybody can argue amongst themselves. And I would, in fact, ask that everybody here this evening does respect every person's right to have and express their own personal opinion, even if it's different opinion to your own, no matter whether or not you find the answer to the question or some response or some attitude to be different and even offensive to you. I would also ask you to respect the primary rule this evening, which is that it is only peaceful and respectful discussion that should prevail. I do not wish to have to intervene in any hostile discussion, since as well as being a practicing Christian, I'm also a devout coward. So, having got the housekeeping out of the way, I will just explain what the format for this evening is going to be. There'll be basically 3 sessions. Each candidate will first be given 3 minutes each to introduce themselves, their parties, and their visions. A draw has already taken place. Each candidate, as they arrived, was asked to take a number, and that has determined the seat allocation, beginning one on my immediate right. And so when written questions that have finally been collected, they will be collated to avoid too much duplication, and then these will be reviewed, and we'll come up with some substantial questions to represent the views of all the needs of everybody here this evening, we hope. I will then read the question to each, well, I'll just read it once, but each candidate will then have the opportunity then to respond for 90 seconds at the most. I ought to have said the first opening statements that they make for what they stand for, what their vision is, that will last for 3 minutes. I have a timer. In fact, I have 2 timers in case one goes wrong. And I will be giving them a 10-second notice that their time is coming to an end. So 3 minutes for the opening, and then each question will be 90 seconds response to that question. And again, I'll give a 10-second warning at the end as they approach the end, so that they can sum up within that 90 seconds. When the alarm goes, I will be asking for them to move on. At the end of the question period, at 9:30 or just before, or even after if we're flowing too along, then they'll be provided another 90 seconds to sum up the evening as far as they feel, and to say and make any comments that they feel they need to make based on how the evening's questions have gone. So we're trying to keep it as informal, as inflexible, as we can, and we hope that you will get the best from this evening. So I will begin then with asking Steve Dick, who is the Green Party candidate, to stand, or at least not to stand, but to make his first presentation, which, once I get my timer going, he will have 90 seconds to complete.
3 minutes.
I beg your pardon, 3 minutes. There we go. Please begin.
It is really nice to be here this evening. My wife and I were married in a cathedral very similar to this, if you go upstairs, about 28 years ago. And it's great to be part of this conversation. I'm so grateful for the leadership that Pope Francis is providing the world on climate action. In June, Pope Francis stated, failure to act urgently to reduce greenhouse gases would be a brutal act of injustice toward the poor and future generations. It's wrong for the government of Canada to be subsidizing the oil industry and building a pipeline. There are many pressing issues facing the people of Guelph. Yes, our children are calling us to face the climate emergency, and we have an affordable housing crisis, and we have a lack of mental health care funding. Broken promises, corporate interference, and conflicts of interest at the highest level of our government have eroded the people's trust that a Liberal government will act decisively for our most pressing issues. In June, former Liberal Environment Minister David Anderson urged Trudeau to reject the Trans Mountain Pipeline, saying, there is no credible evidence to suggest that Asia is likely to be a reliable or significant market for Alberta bitumen. There's no business case for this pipeline. It's environmentally and morally bankrupt. In a recent International Monetary Fund report, in 2015, our government subsidized the fossil fuel industry to a tune of $60 billion. Imagine the social housing, the healthcare, and the education that we could fund with $60 billion. This government promised to end fossil fuel subsidies, but it's building a pipeline. This government fails to keep its promises. Instead of focusing on yesterday's economy, we need real leadership in support of the economy of the future. Clean energy technologies are less expensive and create great local jobs. Every dollar invested in clean tech will result in 7 times more jobs than the same dollar invested in the oil sands. Every year, $500 million leaves our community to purchase energy generated outside of Guelph. Zero interest loans to homes and businesses for low carbon solutions means we can have cheap local power, keeping that money and great jobs here in Guelph. We, the Greens, have a real plan for practical, sustainable solutions. I'm so pleased that our platform has received a green light from the Parliamentary Budget Office. A few Green MPs can hold the balance of responsibility in a minority government and keep the government accountable to Canadians. As a person of faith, I share your desire for justice, for Guelph, for Canada, and for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would now ask Mike Waslin, an independent.
Hello. I've never done this before. I'm not a politician. Matter of fact, I'm not even a well-versed man in politics. When I first started into this journey, I didn't even know these guys get paid. I was willing to do this for nothing. Furthermore, I didn't take anything from anybody. I wouldn't charge any money. I wouldn't take any donations, nor will I accept any. I'm not doing that for that purpose. I was called here today, and I was called to give you a warning. I didn't know that I was going to get involved in this, and I ended up on a bus going to Ottawa, and they called it pro-life. Now, I didn't have a clue what was going on. I didn't even know what it was for, but I ended up there. And then I heard about this pro-life and pro-choice. So that brings me into telling you where I came from. Because the only choice I knew about was Satan's choice. That was a motorcycle gang downtown Toronto. And then they ventured in, joined up with the Hells Angels. So that's the only choice I knew about. And I'm really disturbed by what's going on today. So I'll give you my background. I come from Cabbagetown, Toronto, downtown Toronto. I come from a family of 10 kids with a broken home. My wife that I married, God bless her, 50 years, we'll be married March 21st, but she starts her chemo and her radiation tomorrow. She lost a lung and then a tumor and so on. So we've been together, and I shouldn't even be here tonight, but God's called me here. So I grew up in Cabbagetown. I spent 40 years at the front door of Maple Leaf Gardens selling tickets. Okay? So I got an education out there. I had the chief of police, his phone number. I had done business with Ottawa, the Parliament buildings. My claim to fame is I never wanted to be the Prime Minister. Matter of fact, I don't even want to get elected. But if you vote me in, I'll have to go. I really don't want to go. But I can tell you, my claim to fame is when I got to the Prime Minister's office once, because I was there on a matter of something that happened to my son and family, I said, listen, there's only one thing I really want to do while I'm here after we had lunch. So what's that? I said, I want to put my feet up on the Prime Minister's desk. I did that. So that's my claim to fame. So anyways, the reason and how I got to Guelph is I was in the Don jail. And the first time I got into trouble, I was a young teenager, and I got 27 months in 1968, and I ended up in the Guelph Reformatory. Then, so believe me, I'm not going to pretend I'm anything that I'm not. Thanks be to God, I got saved about 15 years ago. And it would take me 40 years to give you my testimony. But if anybody's really interested, I'll be here after it's over, and I'll fill you in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now if we move on to Ashish Sachan.
Oh,
I beg your pardon, my cards have slipped.
I was going to say, I have the mic.
You do, and you may use it. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Slip of the card. So now we have Mark Paralovis.
Thank you. My name is Mark Paralovis, and that rhymes with for all of us. Close enough. And I grew up in Guelph. I left for a few years and to go to college, and I came back and raised my family here. But I'm going to talk about the issues mostly. So the out-of-control cost of living, the out-of-control housing prices, they affect everyone in Guelph at every single level. The kids, the young kids, 18 to 25, can't afford to get into a home. They can't afford to buy into the market. It's far too expensive. We have rampant speculation happening in our markets as well. We have apartments and houses that are sitting vacant. And it's most noticeable in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, but it's happening in other cities now too, including Guelph. I've knocked on a few of those doors. We have a federal government that ignores the real difficulties that are encountered by the municipalities and provinces with regard to infrastructure. Housing in this case, but other infrastructure, hospitals and roads come to mind as well. And his plan is to increase the number of people entering this market. We've already shown that it's not feasible to overwhelm the municipalities or provinces. We just can't afford it. Money laundering is also playing a role, increasing the price of Canadian real estate by $40 billion in 2018. That's the same amount that Canada pays in transfer payments to the provinces for healthcare. The RCMP lack the resources to effectively fight this crime, and this artificially inflates an already pressured market. I was at Norfolk Manor this afternoon, and I was speaking with some elderly people and their sons and daughters, and the daughter was saying to me, listen, my daughter can't afford a house, she's a teacher, that's crazy. She said, and also, I'm looking at retiring, I can't afford what my mom's paying, because who's gonna pay for it? My daughter can't afford the house. And I pointed out the carbon tax increases the price to the home, increases the price to you, to the person who's purchasing the service. And so when the cost of living is increasing at a much faster rate than government or anybody else can increase a fixed income, that's a problem that's being ignored by this government, and nobody seems to be willing to talk about it. To address this, the People's Party is proposing a repeal of the carbon tax. The carbon tax does not reduce emissions, and I can prove that if you're interested. And so, instead of making everything more expensive, I want to make sure you have money in your pockets to afford things that are necessary to live in Canada. We will also propose to reduce immigration from 350,000 people per year to between 100 and 150,000 per year, and change the ratio to make sure that businesses can still employ the people that they need, but we will have fewer overall people, and therefore the pressure on the housing market will be less. We will give more support to the RCMP and border service agents to crack down on money laundering and increase the speed at which claims can be processed. This will help clear the backlog and reduce demand and lower housing costs, fixing the problems of the young kids not being able to get into housing currently.
10 seconds, please.
Oh, thank you very much. We want to keep taxpayer dollars within Canada. We want to stop spending that money outside of our economy. When that money leaves our economy, it doesn't help Canadians. So I want to help Canadians in Canada. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And now we have Ashish Sashan from the Conservative Party.
Thank you very much. I want to take a moment to thank the Basilica of Our Lady Immaculate for hosting this all-candidate meeting. I also want to recognize and thank other candidates present here tonight. It is a great pleasure to be with you all today and represent the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm a first-generation immigrant, a scientist, a veterinarian, husband, and a father, and a very proud Canadian. Myself and my wife Amita are both born to Hindu families. However, our parents made choices for us to attend Catholic schools back in India. The foresight of our parents for their decision some 40-odd years ago to expose us to Catholic school education in a country that is predominantly Hindu has helped and influenced our worldview and personalities in who we are today as parents, as spouses, and as human beings. We are all connected through the common thread of shared humanity. My wife Amita is with me today. She is sitting right there. She is a PhD in plant pathology and works as a director for an international agrochemical company. My daughter Sarah is 12 years and my son Arian is 10 years old. They both attend St. Michael's School here in Guelph. I'm a veterinary doctor and I have a master's degree in veterinary pharmacology. I moved to USA in 2005 to complete my PhD in toxicology from the Department of Biochemistry, Biophysics, and Molecular Biology. I permanently moved to Guelph with my family in 2013. Today, I work as a Chief Science Officer for a Canadian clean technology company
which provides eco-friendly and safer alternatives to petroleum-based products. Our Conservative Party platform aims to make Canada economically strong and a Canada that will live within its means, and that the trust in institutions will be maintained, and that we will have strong international standing, all the while taking care of our senior citizens and veterans with respect and dignity they deserve. Conservative government will make sure that our immigration system is fair, orderly, and compassionate, that our brave law enforcement officers have all the necessary tools to fight crime, that our children are safe, protected, and we protect the environment and care for our common home. Canada should be a beacon of hope for all of humanity for all times to come, and a country where we preserve long-held Canadian values, culture, and traditions of hard work, enterprise, and freedom of speech. A strong country for a family which we call Guelph, and a family that unites each one of us. As we approach Remembrance Day, we remember the sacrifices of many who served and those who never came back. We owe each and every one of them an enormous debt of gratitude, not just once a year, but every day we live and enjoy this wonderful country. Lest we forget. Thank you again to the organizers of this event for inviting all the candidates today. God bless you and God bless Canada.
Now we have Cornelius Cleverin from an independent party.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And also, I thank the organizers for inviting all the candidates to an all-candidates meeting. I mean, that's what it should look like, right? All the candidates should be up here rather than have corporate powers like Rogers or the Chamber of Commerce cherry pick who the candidates are going to be. That seems to be happening all across Canada. So there are like hundreds of candidates that really never get invited to major all-candidates meetings. And I think that's a disgrace and a dishonor, and it's extremely undemocratic. And what for? So you have these corporations like Rogers that invite all the candidates, rather, not all the candidates, but the major parties, and what do we get? We get the major parties, and what? They get elected to go to Parliament, and then what happens? They sit around and they're getting told what to do by the party leadership. Everything about democracy is skewed. From the moment the candidates, most of the candidates are excluded, to those who got elected from the major parties, to being told what to do in Parliament. And then who tells the leadership in Parliament what to do? Isn't it the big corporations, the very ones like Rogers and the Chamber of Commerce that are cherry picking the democratic process in Canada, and yet now they sit in Parliament, and what do we have? Very little representation. So, I have a platform. I don't know if I have time to talk about the entire platform. I have a world vision. I believe that the way that we should proceed on this planet is to proceed on a socialist scale, that if we are going to deal with things like the climate change crisis, the burning of the Amazon, instituting water rights, protecting animal rights, all these things require a planetary approach. It requires a plan on a planetary global scale. So already the things that you see in front of you, the people that you will elect to Parliament, are largely becoming irrelevant. Climate change is going to force a different perspective, a different alignment of the way people and democracy are going to work on this planet. So that is a large vision I have. The other one that I fear every day I wake up is the possibility of a nuclear war. That is not talked about anymore, but it's as real as, say, climate change is real. So, then of course there's the military.
10 seconds, please.
$1.7 trillion spent worldwide on the military. Imagine if we could take that money and pour it into social services around this planet. That's what I'm advocating. Let's get rid of the military. Let's get rid of nuclear warheads. Let's unite behind climate change, and let's all work towards a world Congress that deals with this planet on a planetary scale. Thank you.
And now we have Gordon Truscott, Christian Heritage Party.
The Christian Heritage Party of Canada was started in 1987, mostly by peaceful Dutch Christians who could find no party to represent their views. A great number had had experiences in World War II and had seen killing firsthand. They saw no need for abortion, the taking of an innocent human life. Coming from a long tradition of heterosexual marriage, they wanted to be able to vote for this too. For myself, I was born with a serious congenital condition, and as a result was sick for more than the first year of my life. Had my condition been diagnosed now, I would have been aborted, as there was no cure for my affliction. In addition to my early distress, my growth was stunted until I was 16. I was often misused as a result by larger people. I hope that no one here has had a pail of water dumped on their head simply because they're smaller than others. My life continued to have unwanted and challenging problems which linger even into today. At about age 40, I began to find some purpose for my life, and I became much happier and more useful. Now I'm very pleased with my situation, and I find I can often help others, especially those in need. For the Christian Heritage Party, I see the CHP as helping others. There's an organization called Canadians for Tax Fairness at taxfairness.ca, which spells out their vision to replace federal income tax with a sales tax. No one could escape paying tax in this way. No one could cheat on their taxes. No one could find loopholes or disguise their income. The CHP wants to pay off our federal debt like a mortgage, a certain amount each year. We believe that it is wrong to rob from your children and grandchildren. Some women have an abortion and, like tin soldiers, have no emotional response whatsoever. Others feel deeply the conflict of having taken the life entrusted to them. We would partner anonymously with women wanting counseling. They would choose a counselor and pay a small fee. The federal government would then pay the remainder, given that we did not provide any information about complications after an abortion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Truscott. That gives me a bit of a dilemma because I've got 31 seconds left on my timer and I can't start it again until it's finished. So just talk amongst yourselves and make out that nothing's going on for the next 20 seconds. And then hopefully by the time that's over, we will have enough time to move on to our next candidate. 10 seconds, please, Mr. Truscott. Okay, we're nearly there. And I'll be able to start you in a second. There we go. Okay, so we now have Lloyd Longfield representing the Liberal Party. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. You built up the tension in the room. And Bishop Ustrecki and Father Ian, thank you for having us to the church here. When we sit in the church, two things come to mind for me off the top. One is that you may not know, but in Parliament every day we start with a prayer. I was surprised to hear that, or to see that, and to participate in it. And we do pray for our sovereign, we pray for our country, we pray for us to have a deeper understanding of our roles as members of Parliament, and we also pray for us to have wise decisions and to preserve the good of our country. And then the doors are open to the public. So every morning we start with a reflection. And one of the things that I'm struck with tonight is we're reflecting on what do we need to do going forward? How do we create a better community? How do we create a better country using the backgrounds that we all come to the table with? When I think of my background, I started my community service in the parish. I was chair of the parish council at Holy Cross in Winnipeg, and then chair of the parish council at Holy Rosary in Guelph, and worked with the liturgy committee, worked with the school and the connection between faith and learning. I was chair of the school council at St. James. And so when Frank Valeri had asked me if I would consider running for office, I said, I've never been a member of a political party, I've never volunteered for a campaign. And he said, Lloyd, it's service, it's community service. And that's really the core of what we try to do as potential members of Parliament. But I've been fortunate to be the 15th member of Parliament for Guelph since Confederation. And the responsibility that comes with that, thinking of the people that came before us, for any of us, and what they've contributed to the community, and how do we use our talent to try to reflect the best in our nature and the best in the nature of our communities. And I was so fortunate to get to know Bill Weingart before he passed, and to have his counsel, and also Frank Valeriot. And Frank said, forget Ottawa, it's all about Guelph. Bill Weingart said, never start a meeting without thanking your wife. And my wife Barb is here tonight. It's about family and the support that our family has so that we can support the community. The lessons that I've had from Jim Schroeder's daughter, who works on our campaign, and her lasting memories are her dad late nights, but laughing during the day.
10 seconds,
community. So I hope to continue to be serving you as your member of Parliament, and struggling as we go forward, but drawing on the strength of our community. Thank you.
We're now having the draw to see the order that we're going to have the questions.
I'm going to be. Oh, no, this is the hall. I got number one.
You did? Well, there you go.
Well, I've already got the mic.
Why don't we just go back
And
down?
I'm over
Okay, we're
13
just gonna go like
minutes,
that.
24
Wonderful.
seconds. So how are we doing, Paul?
We're doing okay. We're about ready to start you on 90 seconds. And I'll begin then with the first question from the floor. Many parties have policies to help Canadians buy a home. Is there a policy to help Canadians who need to rent and are finding it difficult to find suitable places to rent and finding the cost very high? You have 90 seconds beginning now.
Thank you. And this does bring it into the local. Canada now has a national housing strategy. And we haven't been in the housing market as a federal government for about 40 years. But we've done that because we need to influence the developments within our communities, and working with City Council and working with the province to try and get the right stock of housing. How much affordable housing do we need? How much seniors housing do we need? How many rental units? And Guelph has the lowest vacancy rate in Canada in rental units. But what you'll see is we are building apartments, and there are incentives for builders to build apartments. There are tax incentives for them to do that, but they also have to include affordable units within their developments, and City Council's passed some regulations around that as well. So a place to call home, we've been able to reduce chronic homelessness in Guelph and Wellington County by 24% in 2018 alone. Our goal is to reduce chronic homelessness by 50% by 2025. So we are on the way to doing that, but we need to have rental units. But it is part of the continuum. And what I'm working on is a development at St. Joe's, so that seniors have a place to move. And
10
if they
seconds,
move,
please.
they can get out of their mid-range houses, which then opens up the lower market, which then hopefully draws demand into the apartment market. So it is part of a continuum, and we are working on that as a federal government.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we could move on now then, please, to Mr. Dick. Start on at number one at this end, and then we'll work forward. And you have 90 seconds beginning now.
The Green Party would bring funding so that we can clean up the brownfield sites in Guelph. The Immaculate brownfield site, 200 Beverly, has been vacant for too many years. We need to build housing there, and we need to have inclusive housing, so we've got rental units, rent year to income units built there. The Green Party is also going to bring $750 million for new affordable housing builds, and $750 million for across Canada for rent supplements. What we've seen since the last election, the cost of housing has gone up 30% here in Guelph. We know our incomes haven't gone up 30%. We also know that the mortgage and the lending rules have become tighter. It has become very, very difficult for young families to participate in our market. We need to look at how our tax system works. The interest rates have remained low so long, and the appreciation of housing values have gone up and up and up. People are buying houses and leaving them vacant. They're turning housing into a profit-making opportunity. We need to have housing be for homes. We need to have housing be a right for Canadians.
10 seconds, please.
We need to adjust how our capital gains tax process works for investment properties to make sure that young people have an opportunity to participate in our market.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
you have 90 seconds starting now.
Yeah, I don't know very much about the housing. I don't know much about it at all. I know that I lived around all kinds of housing projects downtown Toronto, and they don't work. They really don't work. And you know, when I'm sitting here at this table, whether I'm an independent or with another party, it doesn't matter. Because anybody that makes you any promises at this table, they can't keep them. None of them. Matter of fact, if they get elected and go into Ottawa, if they're only a backbencher and they're not a member, appointed by the Prime Minister, they have no say. So how can we make these promises? And furthermore, I'm more interested in the people that are living right now that are not being able to get into hospitals, not getting health care. When I was a kid growing up in this country, you could go into an emergency and be looked after in 15 minutes. I have a friend that runs all the hospitals in downtown Toronto, UHN, and the Prime Minister come in to see him. And there was a big meeting, and he said to the Prime Minister, he said, look, he said, why do you keep on bringing these people in? He said, we got 100 people laying out in the hallway in the emergency, we can't get beds for them. Prime Minister said, well, we'll look after that. My friend had to go on to his next meeting. And when he went on to his next meeting, the Prime Minister said to all his colleagues, when I come back, make sure that guy's not here. And in closing, I don't know what God you're praying to, Mr. Longfield, but the Prime Minister said one of the biggest problems in this country is Canadians. And don't take my word for it, check it out.
Thank you very much.
Christians, I'm sorry. He said Christians, I'm sorry.
I'm going to introduce you as Mark.
That's fine. Mark works.
You have 90 seconds starting from now.
Thank you. I kind of started with the housing question, and as I said, we have massive speculation in our market. We have foreign buyers who are buying our properties and leaving them empty. So my party would fund the RCMP and crack down on this $40 billion of fake money that's coming into our market. That increases the cost. And your salaries aren't increasing. Our salaries aren't increasing. We can't keep up with the injection of money. The reason that they're injecting this money is to launder it from the sale of drugs. This is a method called the Vancouver method. It is well documented, and in early 2018, they couldn't wash the money through the Vancouver casinos anymore because it got too hot, too many newspaper articles. So they started washing it through the real estate market. We will crack down on that. Often, when housing prices increase by 30% and you see vacancy rates crater to less than 2%, I think we're 1.6 in Guelph, that is a supply and demand problem. So we are the only party not talking about enticing seniors out of their homes to make room for more people to buy into the market. We are talking about actually solving the cause of this, which is the federal government not giving appropriate numbers to the provinces for them to
10 seconds.
appropriately grow. So what's happening is the demand is 50,000 units of apartments, but we only have 37,000. Those are Toronto numbers, but the same thing is happening here. That lack of supply increases the cost of the market, of the housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Mr. Clifford.
so we know housing is getting out of reach of more and more people in Canada, in Guelph as well. So people getting new jobs, I think is extremely difficult for them to buy a new home. And I know personally, I've been to door-to-doors, and I know senior citizens who are out of their homes and they're renting properties. And it really amazes me that a person who is retired, has contributed to this country all his life, has to be out of his home and rent an apartment. And so that's really heartbreaking. Anyways, but the Conservative Party platform is based on affordability. We are trying to make sure that more money is back in the pockets of all Canadians so that they can save more. And if they're trying to buy a new home, they should have more money for down payment savings. Apart from that, we're trying to cut the red tape and reduce regulations so that more housing is available, and fix the stress test for our new buyers. And also increase the amortization rate to 30 years so that the housing becomes more affordable for youngsters or the first-time home buyers. And I think that's pretty much it right from my side.
Thank you very much. I just have a few seconds to finish on this one. Oh, I can cancel it. Sorry, I'm a neophyte with these things. I'm sure you'll work that out, as I appear to be also with announcing the wrong candidate, so I apologise for that, Mr. Sasha. It's now Mr. Clevering, and you have 90 seconds beginning now.
Yes, when it comes to affordable rental units, clearly it depends on how much income people have. So my approach would be twofold. One is to lessen the gap between the ultra-rich and the ordinary working people, giving working people far more money than what they have now. The other thing is a guaranteed income. A guaranteed national income that people can afford to rent units. And the rent levels would be based on the guaranteed annual income. Therefore, if the rental units are too expensive, the guaranteed income would have to go up as well. How would I pay for that? Well, I would go after the offshore tax accounts that the major parties continue to protect. There's billions of dollars on offshore illegal tax havens. Let's grab that money. Let's put that into a national affordable affordable housing program for the entire country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Gordon Truscott, you have 90 seconds to answer the question beginning now.
In terms of rental housing, apparently 10% of houses in Canada are vacant. There's nobody in them. So we would have two alternatives. One would be to tax these houses, these owners higher, to encourage them to make use of their homes, or to advise them that they could rent their housing out, because it's silly to have housing available and not using it. I taught English for a while in Hong Kong, and there were husband and wife and a helper and two teenage sons, all living in 600 square feet. Well, they did that for years, and then they moved on, and they've been able to afford much more than that. But maybe we need to change our structure as to the size of housing that's offered, and determine what is it that people actually need, so that we're not forcing people to rent larger facilities than they actually have to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Truscott. The next question we have then, because we will now move on to the beginning of the term again to answer these questions. And this question is, what is your party's position on the abortion issue? And can a pro-life person be a candidate in your party? And that will begin then, as I say, Mr. Dick, beginning now.
So I will protect a woman's right to safe and legal access to reproductive health care, including access to abortion. The Green Party policy is that all women must have timely access to safe and legal abortions. The Greens will increase investments in reproductive health care education, reproductive health education and care. And no, someone who is not in favor of abortion would not be able to run as a Green candidate.
Thank you very much. And 90 seconds. Mr. Watson.
My platform is I'm completely against abortion. Completely against it unless I have a plan. I'm the only one that has a plan. If a woman is raped, if you see my brochure, it's on the back of my brochure. If a woman is raped, and if she has, I've made a plan where the government just turns around and says, here, get an abortion. I say, support that woman. Give her a year's financial assistance, help her out, give her mental care, give her physical care. And then if she wants to, doesn't want to have the baby, that's fine. But when she murders this baby in the womb, then she's got to live with that for the rest of her life. There's all kinds of people that want to have children. They'll adopt them. So why are we murdering people instead of saving them? That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, moving on then.
Okay. In 1988, the abortion laws in Canada were struck down, the Morgentaler versus Supreme Court decision. And in that decision, the Supreme Court said very clearly that the legislature of Canada and the Parliament should create new laws that respected a woman's right as handed down in that decision, but also protected the lives of the unborn. Now, we're in a situation now where discussing abortion is not politically good. It's terrible. But Mr. Bernier and the People's Party of Canada have no official position on abortion, and that means that me as a candidate am able to bring it forward in the House of Commons and vote my conscience on it. That also means another candidate, Laura Lynn, has come forward with a proposed bill, the bill for the preborn, which would maintain abortion access up until the 24th week. After the 24th week, you would have a responsibility to see the child born as normal and pursue other avenues of adoption or something to that effect. And what I would do as a member of Parliament is I would bring that to you, the constituents. I think it's incredibly crazy that Canada doesn't have any protection for preborn babies. I was unaware, because I was educated in the Ontario
10
system.
seconds, please.
Thank you. Of how big a deal this was, that it wasn't normal for countries to not protect unborn children, but Canada stands among very few other countries that don't have laws on the books, and I think we should have this conversation, and I think it should be had in the House of Commons. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think as far as the question that can a pro-life person be can run as a member of Conservative Party? Yes, absolutely, yes. We do have candidates in the Conservative Party who are pro-life, so the answer for that is yes. And but Andrew Scheer government and our leader has been very clear that we are not going to reopen this debate, and nothing has changed for our party on this issue. So Conservative MPs will continue to bring forward private members' bills and motions. Votes on matters of conscience will continue to be free votes. That was a policy during 10 years of Conservative government under Stephen Harper, and it will continue to be the policy under the new Conservative government under Andrew Scheer. Again, I reiterate, Andrew Scheer has been very clear, we are not going to reopen the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clever. 90 seconds begins now.
I just want to correct Mark when he was talking about Henry Morgentaler versus Her Majesty the Queen. In that decision, the Supreme Court ruled that a woman's right to an abortion was violated if she has no access to that. Therefore, using Section 7 of the Constitution, the Charter, the law with respect to abortions fell. And that's where it is today, of course. There is no law with respect to abortions. Speaking personally, I believe it's entirely up to a woman to choose what she does with her body. If that means proceeding with an abortion, that's entirely up to her. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And then finally for this question. No, we've answered all the questions. Sorry, these cards keep getting muddled up.
So there's two more of us.
Oh, you're right too.
Yeah.
Where do you keep
It's not very democratic.
Sorry about that.
The Christian Heritage Party is completely pro-life. You have to be pro-life to run. I'm a pro-life candidate. Many people, especially younger people these days, think, oh, women don't have any problem. They have an abortion and then they go on with their lives as though nothing happens. But time after time you hear, no, that's not the way it is. So in the early 1960s, men largely took responsibility for their children. However, after 1969, we soon got to 90 to 100,000 abortions a year. We're up to more than 4 million now. But this has also included sexually transmitted diseases. People are doing whatever they want sexually, and then it's up to the rest of us who don't participate to pay for the health care or pay for the drugs, whatever is necessary. It's just totally skewed. We should be taking care of women who have had an abortion, at the very least.
Thank you very much, Mr. Truscott. And now, Lloyd Longfield, please.
Yeah, this is one of the difficult questions of the night and not unexpected. The Liberal Party has a pro-choice stance for all candidates. When I discussed this with the Liberal Party before running, and I also had a spiritual counselor at Ignatius Center to look at all choices that I would be needing to make as a member of Parliament and how that would relate to my faith, as well as how that relates to my responsibilities as a member of Parliament in protecting the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the laws of Canada. So it was a struggle for me. But where I've landed on this is that Catholic rights need to be protected in all discussions. And we do have Catholics within our caucus, and I'm one of them, that stands up for Catholic rights as part of the overall rights. That Muslims have rights as well within their faith. The Charter protects the rights of people to worship and to have their beliefs. So pro-choice doesn't mean pro-abortion, it means pro-choice. And within the Constitution, it's now a medical procedure that has fallen to us through the Supreme Court, which is part of Parliament.
10 seconds, please.
So the Supreme Court has ruled on this. It's now within regulations that fall under medical treatment, and as a Catholic, I need to make sure that choices are available. The Church will then influence the choices of Catholics.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Our next question then is, how do you manage your personal values with those of your party or party leader? I'm sorry if there is some connection, but these are random questions.
My personal values are all according to the Word of God. Just by the Word of God and the Word of God only. As far as the world is upside down right now. God didn't say we could have abortions. He said that's murder in the womb. And we're hearing men now say a woman has a right to their own body. That happened right in the Garden of Eden. When Adam, the Bible says Adam hearkened, he listened to the woman. And that's where his mistake was made. And now today I'm hearing, oh, she's the boss. It's up to her. That's not what it was. The woman is our partner. The rib was taken out of man close to his heart because that brings us together as one. God doesn't approve of these things, murder. And he doesn't approve of the seed going to the ground. That goes for homosexuals, and that goes for women that have abortion and murder. God loves all of us, but these sins are detestable. And if you approve of them, then you're part of that. But he says redemption, and he wants to save us all. And it's available to everybody, no matter what your sin is. Repentance will save you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Okay, Mark.
Thanks. In 2015, I voted for Justin Trudeau. I voted for Justin Trudeau because I expected him to fix the problems that were happening under Stephen Harper. I was excited about it, and I fought with my dad about it. And I was disenfranchised very quickly. I was surprised at how, poorly things went. The budgets didn't really talk about budgetary items, and scandal after scandal after scandal, starting with India. Unfortunate. And so I was watching, and I watched Mr. Bernier. He left the Conservative Party and said, the Conservative Party is offering basically what the Liberals are offering, which is the same thing as the NDP and the Greens and everyone else. And he was going to offer something different. And all of what he said made sense to me. reducing immigration actually starts to try and solve one of the major problems we're seeing. And no other party was talking about this. They were having fights about words being violence, fights about people being racist when they were discussing fiscal questions. Like, why are we spending $200 million on non-citizens? It doesn't make sense to me when we have homeless veterans, when we have drug-addicted people who need help in our country, in Canada. Why are we sending money outside of Canada? And so when we talk about personal values, the leader of the People's Party, thank you, the leader of the People's Party of Canada and myself align very closely because he wants to put Canada first, and I want to see Canada put first from our federal government. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question. So it gave me some time to think here. So my personal values are Canadian values, and Canadian values are conservative values. I put some points on my opening speech here that Canadian values like culture and tradition and hard work and enterprise, love for country, love our history, take care of our senior citizens, veterans, children, and environment. I think all these values I'm so closely aligned to. I think these are my personal values, and these are my party values as well. So yes, the answer to that question is yes.
Thank you very much. Move on to Mr. Clegg.
So my values revolve around socialist values. I can name some of them very briefly: equality, freedom, democracy, peace and cooperation, protecting basic human rights, and ridding the world of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The national leader of the Christian Heritage Party is Rod Taylor, a personal friend. I phone to him regularly. He lives in British Columbia. He came here in February to speak about what the platform would be for this election and try and get electoral district association going. I had hoped it would go overnight, but that didn't happen, but that wasn't his fault. Anyway, he's a man of deep principles. I respect him. We are so much alike, we could virtually be twins, but I'd like to say I have more faith than he does.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wilmington.
The question of how do you reconcile personal values with the values of your leader or the people around you and your party? One thing that the leader of the Liberal Party has said from day one is that diversity is our strength. When we came to Ottawa as members of Parliament, he said, I don't want you to agree with everything I say. I want you to represent your communities. I want you to use your own experiences, your own intelligence to push back, to lean in, to listen to your constituents, to get their voices into our rooms and into our committees and into our discussions in the House of Commons. So diversity is a strength, and diversity of opinions and diversity of faiths, diversity of backgrounds really is what makes Canada strong. But inclusion is a choice. And being able to include those ideas in how you develop smart policies for the country in a world that right now is drifting in all kinds of different directions. Canada is a beacon of diversity and inclusion, but we still struggle against racism, we struggle against tribalism, we struggle against partisan politics tearing us apart. So really what we need to get to is from diversity to inclusion, and our leader is really encouraging that, and we're learning as we go, but we learn from each other. Thank you.
I really like this question. In the Green Party, our leader will not coerce members to vote in a certain way or to speak in any way. We've seen that our current government is so vulnerable to having the Prime Minister's office being the target of big money and corporations, and members of Parliament are coerced to do as they're told. We have legislation essentially written by corporations, and that legislation is pushed down through parliamentary committees. If you don't do as you're told, you're kicked off the committee. So it's so important that we have individual members of parliament representing Canadian citizens. Now, then the question is, how does it happen that there is any kind of coherence within the Green Party? We have Vision Green, members who or members of the party who wish to become candidates and essentially spokespersons for Vision Green. They need to adopt Vision Green. They need to be part of that development of policy. And that provides us with a foundation of common values. And from that, we can actually represent our citizens and of Guelph, and that's what I hope for. I hope that we can have members of parliament from across Canada actually working together to provide best policy for Canadians and not be run by corporate interests.
Thank you very much. The next question then is going to be, what is your stance on water production water protection in Guelph?
Very specific. With regards to water protection, it is not something that is prioritized within my party's platform. And so, I will pass the microphone.
I think Guelph is one of the best water quality in the country, and we have to work with the private industry to make sure that our water resources are maintained and they're sustainable over time. I think so. Our party will work with the private industry to make sure that our resources are adequately used so that they're sustainable, and we make proper use of and they take into concern the citizens and the environmental concerns related to them.
Thank you.
To protect our water, I would certainly take it out of the hands of corporations like Nestle's. I believe once you privatize water, it's going to disappear in the name of profit. So there should be more money invested in Guelph's water infrastructure so that top water is cleaner, better, more widespread. I would go so far as to entrench water rights in an amended constitution. In that way, we will guarantee that all that fresh water in Canada isn't going to be owned by some foreign multinational. We have to stand firm on this policy, otherwise we will soon have nothing but bottled water and you pay for tap water. We can't have that.
Thank you, Mr. Clary. Truscott.
I used to live near Arkle, where we have the famous Arkle Springs. And I was amazed at how the water from there was servicing so much of Guelph. And yet, in certain days or times, we're cutting back in the use of water. So at some point as the city grows, we're going to have to be negotiating with Nestle, which is making use of the Everquell Springs, so that water is available for the city of Guelph. We can't be starving ourselves of water when the corporation is making money hand over fist and apparently paying extremely little for the privilege of doing that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Longcroft.
We do have some jurisdictional issues here where provincial jurisdiction over water taking permits, provincial jurisdiction over water that doesn't cross provincial boundaries. So in terms of water protection in Guelph, I've sat on the supply water strategy committee, I've sat on the wastewater strategy committee. We're looking at how do we reduce our consumption of water by 50% by 2031 over the 2005 numbers, and we're on target for doing that. So Guelph is a leader in water management. Funding the research at the University of Guelph is key, and we've been able to provide a lot of funding for groundwater research at the University of Guelph. Federally, we're looking at protecting 25% of Canada's oceans by 2025, or by 2030, and 25% of our land by 2030. And again, we're 2 years ahead of schedule to get to that. Federally, we've instituted Bill C-69, which is our environmental protection bill, so that the standards for environmental protection for projects across Canada are now under very stringent rules and regulations that take water into account, which could impact the local supply. Also, the City of Guelph has done a map of the industrial risk profiles of where water treatment needs to be handled in industrial. And federally, we provided funding for snow storage, so that for climate change events that we protect our wastewater management systems.
Thank you very much. Let's move the microphone back.
Thank you.
Get my exercise.
We have not done a very good job of protecting our water. Our First Nations communities are suffering with bottled water advisories. Grassy Narrows has mercury poisoning. There's so many issues that we are facing here in Guelph, having a corporate interest attacking or undermining the security of our water system. Not having federal guidance on this file causes real problems. What the Green Party wants to do is bring together a council of Canadian governments, which would include equal seats for federal, provincial, municipal, and First Nations. We have real infrastructure problems. We need to work together across elections. We can't have the toxic polarizing politics that is currently hampering our ability to ensure that we have safe water for Canadians continue. If we had First Nations wisdom sitting at the table, my sense is the behavior would come up much better than it is right now, and we need to do a much better job for Canadians overall taking care of our water.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, once again, I see that I hope I've woken you up a little bit. But I see we got a lot of seniors here and people around my age. We've never had no water problem in this country. We got a problem right now. The only problem we got is we got a godless country. We're letting government, we're letting man rule us instead of God. If you remember Psalm 72, when we were forming this country in Confederation, there was a man by the name of Tilley. And when we were forming this country, bringing all provinces together, the chairman said, "Sir, what are you doing reading a book when we're forming this country?" He said, "Sir, this is no ordinary book. This is Psalm 72 of the Bible." And he says it's where God gave us dominion from sea to sea. And he gave us dominion and authority. Let's put God back in authority, and you won't be discussing any of this. All as we're getting here is a bunch of people trying to convince you of something they don't know anything about. So I ask everybody, where does your source come from? My source comes from the Word of God. And I got to say this to you. I brought a message here tonight. And you aren't going to like this, but here's the way it is. "Now, therefore, be ye not mockers, leave your bands made strong, for I have heard from the Lord God of hosts a consumption even determined upon the whole earth. Give your ear and hear my voice, hearken unto my speech." Now, consumption is getting mucus in the lungs. It's a disease coming to everybody. Judgment is here.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, our next...
Thank you. Praise
can,
God.
You can applaud, I really don't mind. The next question then, which is going to begin with Mr. Sacha, is currently children in their mother's wombs are defined as not being human beings in our criminal code. Will you or your party work to correct this legal fiction and protect the lives of those children?
I'll stick on with my original statements I made on the question that nothing has changed from a party on this issue. Okay, and the Conservative government will oppose any attempt to open this issue. I think that's related to that. So that's what my statement is.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Trevor.
Well, again, I have to reiterate what I said before, that it's a woman's choice to choose to have an abortion or not. A fetus is not yet a child unless the child is born, in a embracing and warm family. And that's really entirely up to the woman to decide. So, like I said, once the child is born, then the child is given the proper rights. But before then, I think those rights lie with the woman.
Call the trust vote, please.
In spite of modern technology, everybody here spent time in their mother's womb. Were you not a person then? Unfortunately, in Canada, it's gotten so bad, we've had, since 1969, two classes of people. Those who are born and those who may not be born. However, every year there's more than 100 babies that are born alive, and they're set out on a table to die. It was a failed abortion. They were supposed to be aborted, but they weren't. They were born alive. They're living, but they sit there and they die. And that's absolutely wrong, but nobody's doing anything about that.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, we've gone through this once so far. The Supreme Court of Canada has ruled on this. I don't think there's any political party that is challenging the Supreme Court ruling on it. There's regulatory systems in place in terms of access for a woman's right to choose. When it comes to human rights, the right of the woman is the right that the Supreme Court is upholding.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Moving back now then to Mr. Day.
I'm a person of faith, and I worship with different congregations. I find value in each different place I meet, and similarly, I appreciate different people here having different opinions. I hope that you can appreciate my opinion, and that I would be able to be your representative, even though we don't agree on, or at least some of us may not agree on this abortion issue.
Thank you. I was blessed on this campaign trail. I ran into a young lady that had 4 children, and she was explaining to me, her little girl that was there they were told her when the baby was 29 weeks in the mother's womb that she was going to have a Down syndrome child. She should have abortion. And there that little child was, so beautiful, nothing wrong with her at all. So then it brought me to this. In a court hearing, Planned Parenthood employee admits to trafficking in body parts. Okay? They're selling body parts. This is the biggest business going. And you know something? Hillary Clinton started it, and she says, by this we'll change all the religious beliefs. You're all being led down the wrong road by everybody at this table, except for those that do not support abortion. And you're going to get what you want, but you're not going to want what you get. Thank you.
So this has been a journey for me. This has been a learning situation for me. And it started before this election, obviously. I've been discussing this with people. But Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson put forward the Protection of the Unborn Act. And I've discussed this with her at length. I've had conversations with people in Guelph at length. And what this bill does is gives the responsibility to bring the baby to term after 24 weeks. The idea is to maintain the Supreme Court's idea that a woman has a right to choose up until 24 weeks, and then after that protect the unborn. And in these conversations, I've heard that that is not enough. And I understand that. I think that it is interesting that we have the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party, both main parties in Canada, saying that we will not open this debate, we will not discuss this, despite the fact that the Supreme Court has said it is the responsibility of the Parliament to discuss this. So I think that they're abdicating their responsibility by not discussing it. So what I can say to speak to that is that I think that we should have the debate. I think that my party is willing to bring forward clearly controversial statements and
10 seconds.
things that are maybe not popular to discuss, but they do need discussion. Regardless of which side you're on, I think that the place to have that discussion is the House of Commons, and the people to have that discussion are the people you elect to represent you. So I think it's important. I don't have the perfect answer. There isn't a perfect answer right now because we're in a very fraught political situation. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer.
You need a question, and I've answered the question already.
Okay.
A new question.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, the new question.
Oh, it's
is
going
due.
to go down to
Okay.
Gord.
The question is, what is your party's support for increasing the number of long-term care facility beds in Guelph?
Okay, that's my question.
Sorry.
I'm all wrapped up. I need long care here in a minute.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear it because I thought it was
Okay.
excellent.
What is your party's support for increasing the number of long-term care facility beds in Guelph?
Well, as an independent, I support that kind of thing. You know, there's lots of money out there. It's just all being hoarded by some very rich people. A lot of money goes to the military. A lot of money goes to offset fossil fuel industry. All that money could be used towards greater walk-in clinics, more hospitals for the elderly. There's no reason why we can't continue to do that. The excuses that there's no money out there is just a complete lie. So certainly, if I was in a position where I could increase the funding for long-term care in this city and across the country, I would certainly do so.
Thank you very much.
The Christian Heritage Party certainly wants to provide more care for people because a lot of people are just falling through the cracks. For example, I went to the emergency department of Guelph General Hospital here. I was there for 13 hours. They did tests, never saw a doctor. The next morning I had to go to work, never saw a doctor. So I wrote a letter to the hospital board and they said, oh, well, we're sorry that happened. You can come back. I said, well, I'm sorry too. I've already been able to see a doctor. So, you know, if people aren't being cared for, then the question is, why is that? Because health is certainly our basic need, as is long-term care for people. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're saying this is a multi-part question where the federal government does have, the Liberal government has access to funding for facilities like a long-term care facility, also libraries, public spaces. But we need to work with the province in order to put the operations in place, the people that need to do the care, because care is provincial jurisdiction. But we do have funding in place and funding streams for communities to apply to. And I'm working with the City of Guelph on funding stream for St. Joe's, for more spaces for seniors to live. I'm also working with the City of Guelph on funding for the library and the Baker Street development. So we can provide the bricks and mortar funding, but we need the operations funding. Now, under the Canada Health Act, we're going to be including mental health if we get re-elected. So that mental health will be included in the care of any medical care. That includes dementia, it includes mental health that seniors could be facing, that could be supported through the creation of these facilities. We're looking at every person in Canada having access to a doctor, and that being part of the Canada Health Act.
10 seconds, please.
I was on the physician recruitment team for Guelph. We got 8 new doctors here. Then we had a patient shortage instead of a doctor shortage. We could see that developing as we include changes to the Canada Health Act.
Thank you.
It's clear we need to increase funding for long-term care beds. And yes, moving forward with the new beds at St. Joe's is something that the Green Party would support. Talking to seniors who are living in long-term care, it's outstanding. It's outrageous how expensive some of these facilities are. They're just not accessible to most people. It's so important that we have more options available for people, more innovative options for people, different ways of financing so seniors can actually stay in their homes, live together as a number of seniors in one location where we can have medical facilities coming into that home, meals coming into that home, where they can actually have an experience of community, multi-generational community. There are so many great options for our community to develop an experience of aging in our town, in our city, that's completely different from this hallway medicine that we're experiencing right now. Speaking with the emergency doctors at Guelph General, there's no beds available because we've got people who should be in long-term care jamming up the beds. This is very expensive. This is the most expensive healthcare facility in Guelph, and it's
10 seconds, please.
It's filled with people who need long-term care solutions. There's lots of innovative options. We need to get engaged and create new ways to care for our elderly.
Thank you. I had the privilege of being in the Mount Sinai Hospital for a week while my wife was going through cancer treatments. And I got the privilege of speaking to nearly every patient on the 10th floor. And it was just like Canadian Tire. One guy would say, oh, they got the upper lobe, come back now, they're doing the middle lobe. And by the time I got through all these patients, the doctors wanted to throw me out. They didn't want me talking to the patients anymore because I recognized that this was crazy. They were just making money. And then the radiation department, as soon as you come out of radiation, not even 50 feet away, there's a little store where you can buy wigs, $400 and stuff like that. I see the Brinks truck pull up every day. And then you may think that I'm extreme in what I'm saying, but do you like your health care? Because we're not going to have it anymore. When we were younger, we didn't have to pay 10 cents towards anything. Everything was covered by OHIP. And let me explain one thing to you. The reason why we have health care today is because of a minister named Tommy Douglas. He brought the health care into this country.
So healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction, and one of the problems that we have in our country is the federal government running against or directly intervening in provincial programs. There's a reason we have a municipal government, there's a reason we have a provincial government, and there's a reason we have a federal government. The more the federal government gets into and puts its nose into provincial and municipal issues, the bigger problems we have. I worked in education and I worked in group homes, and those things rely on funding. And when we have predictable funding, we could use it the way it's supposed to be used. We can plan for it and say we're getting X number of dollars and we're going to have this many staff and we're going to do this with it and this is the goal. But when we get injections of federal money, it would go to emergency wallpaper services, things that would be extra and nice to haves, but not necessarily moving towards that goal. So it exacerbates the funding because then you've got 3 or 4 people who are relying on the federal funding and then they lose their job after 6 months because the government changes or the funding changes or it runs out. It's only scheduled for 4 years or 5 years and then done. And they don't think to renew it because, well, there's other big problems and other votes to buy. So I like each level of government doing what it's supposed to do well. I would rather the federal government focus on the things that it's supposed to do and giving the provinces the right numbers, the right ability to plan to service the population that will be there rather than overwhelming it and saying, well, here's another couple $100 million that we'll pay on taxes later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so our seniors build this country, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that senior citizens should be given the respect and dignity they deserve. Having said that, as a member of parliament, I'll do everything that is possible from the federal side to make sure that more funding is available and the city of Guelph benefits from there. Also, regarding this long-term care facilities, Liberals broke a key promise for $3 billion funding in long-term care, including palliative care. So I thought I'd just point that out here. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to the next
You
question.
gotta send her the link.
One of the most heart-wrenching experiences in Guelph is to see homeless young people in downtown Guelph, hooked on drugs. What is your plan at the community level to fix this problem?
Often today we're hearing about the opioid problem, where it's touted that, well, we should have safe injection sites. But the question that's never answered is, how long does someone go to a safe injection site? Is that 2 years or 5 years or the rest of their life? I think we need to make the hard choice of helping those who want help to get free of their addiction. Because how are you going to function if you're addicted to opiates in terms of a job or relations with other people? But certainly, as a start, the safe injection sites seem to be helping. And, you know, we have lots of young people that are on the streets, and the mayor, Cam Guthrie, has a task force for this. So I would want to partner federal funds with the mayor's task force to be able to promote this assistance for the homeless youth that are on our streets, of which there are far too many.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott.
Just checking to see our time's okay.
Just a second, I'll be with you in a... Okay, ready to start.
Okay. The homeless in the downtown is something that we've got an amazing team that's been working on, that I've been supporting every way I can. The Community Health Center has a project called the 20,000 Homes Project. That's a nationwide project that includes transitional housing. Looking at the Tiny Homes Project, where people that are under addictions or mental health problems are not qualified to go into housing that's provided by the county. So we need to help to transition them towards housing. We've also got $1.4 million for Guelph and Wellington County to look at where the chronic needs are and how we can meet those needs. So they got some federal funding this year to work on that. And then going forward, we're working with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation to look at ways of incorporating mental health and addictions into the transition housing that we're working on. Downtown, we have the Rapid Access Addiction Center with the Community Health Center that we have supported, and we've also supported the safe injection site, so that we're not going to have people dying on the streets of opioids the way we have been in the recent past in Guelph. So who would have thought Guelph would have come to this point? But we have to look at the vulnerable people, the most vulnerable people we have in our community, and then support organizations like the Community Health Center, like the Sanguine Center, and like others that are helping to try to help people get off their addictions so that we can get them into housing.
Time starts.
We need to have a housing first strategy, which means we need people who are struggling with addiction and homelessness. It's really difficult, near impossible, to actually make good decisions if you haven't had a good place to sleep. If you can't sleep, you can't make good decisions. We are seeing drug addiction and mental health issues, they go together. People who aren't able to receive health care or mental health response, they start self-medicating. You know, they'll do something to relieve the pain. It's really important that we give mental health services in a quick way. We also are seeing people are struggling with, they are given pharmaceutical drugs, and our doctors have overprescribed, and now they get addicted. We are seeing a real issue in the way drugs are used in our society. The safe injection sites are so important. What they allow to have happen is people who are suffering with addiction, they develop relationships with medical professionals. They are in a situation where they can actually learn about how they might be able to move from being addicted to receiving mental health care as well as addiction services. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready? I spent, like I said, I spent 40 years on the street, and what I'm hearing here, this is, I'm sorry if I laughed about this, but this is crazy. Can you imagine if everybody that was an alcoholic, we give them safe spots to drink? That's what we're talking about. We have to help the problem, cure the problem, not entice people into doing these things. Take a look at California. What's going on there? Here, come to Canada. We got injection sites. It's all free. You can get welfare. We'll give you so much a month. And you can have injection sites. This is crazy. All these plans here, I don't understand it one bit, because the Bible says if you don't eat, you shouldn't work. Those people that are disability and they can't work, that's another story. You know what? This is a true story. I heard this from 2 missionaries. They went to different people and they said, the guy was limping down the road and he said, "Sir, would you like to be healed today?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'll lose my disability." So we're enabling these people instead of helping them. I mean, if they would have done that to me when I was a kid, I wouldn't be here sharing that story today. But when I come through the door, I had to look at my parents' face, even if I was out in the street for a week, and they could tell, because they were watching over me. And that's what we need. We don't need this government to get everybody drunk and everybody high so they don't know what's going on. And that's what they're doing to you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Almost all good.
You all right, Mark?
All right. 12,800 deaths since 2016, and that's opiates. 1.48 million over 5 years for Guelph for homelessness. That was the Liberal government, I believe, 2017. That was federal. 12 million for parks, though. Seems odd to me. Diabetics don't get needles under our healthcare system. You've got to pay for that. Drug addicts get needles. Seems weird to me. I don't want to have drugs coming into Canada and wreaking havoc in our families. I don't want to have 12,800 deaths since 2016. That's an incredibly high number. That's very concerning. And it's very concerning that it's happened wholly under this Liberal government. Wild. Not something I expected. So, in order to fix this, part of the problem is drugs are coming in from China. We know this. It's called the Vancouver method. They sell them across Canada, and then they wash the money in our real estate market, increasing the price of homes. This seems insane. So, I don't think people should be cut loose with absolutely no recourse. But I don't think funding safe injection sites for the next 10 or 15 years while ignoring the drugs flooding into our country is a good idea. I think it's a really bad idea. And so I want to actually deal with the root of this idea. I want to stop the drugs, I want to stop the money laundering, and I want to stop the inflation of our housing market, and I want to stop the scourge of our children. I want our kids to be engaged in work and be interested in building a family, not interested in fentanyl. Thank you.
It really amazes me that Canada is a G7 country. We live in the most prosperous nation on the planet, and we still are having homeless problems in Guelph. The city has, I think, more than 20 years of liberal rule now. I think it's about time for a change if we are still trying to figure out how to fix homelessness. Okay, and I think homelessness has a lot of causes. It's not, it doesn't happen because of one single reason. Mental health is one of them, opioids may be one of them, affordability, lack of housing. However, I focus my attention on opioids here and resonate some of the things which were told on this table. Now, Canada has a national addiction crisis. We have to accept that fact. The cycle of injecting, overdosing, and reviving with no adequate assistance to get addicts treatment and into recovery is simply not the type of healthcare Canadians deserve. It is tragic that we have failed these Canadians to the point where injection sites are often the only focus of discussion instead of comprehensive approach to addiction. We need to work towards building a system of care where everyone who struggles with addiction is offered treatment and pathway to recovery so that they become active members of the society in the long term.
I think I would call it direction, hope, and income. That would go a long way to resolving the homeless people's problem in Guelph. When I say income, an annual guaranteed income for everyone in the country would certainly help the homeless. I would encourage and fund more drop-in shelters, and I would establish training centers for those who are looking for that hope by training them in a trade or making them proficient in something that they can go and function in society in a positive way. Where would the funding for all of this come from? Well, you could start selling the Kinder Morgan pipeline, for one, and you can start by ending the subsidies to the oil companies, which is something like $1.3 billion a year. That's what I would try and do to resolve the homeless problem in Guelph.
Thank you very much. So we move on now to the next question. A recent Quebec court decision will be expanding assisted suicide and euthanasia to people with chronic illness and disability, rather than solely people with terminal illness. What is your response and your party's response to this decision? Starting with Mr. Longfield, please.
When we picked up the Bill C-14, where we had to look at the strategy to deal with assisted dying, the Supreme Court had said you need to have legislation put in place within 6 months of the decision having been made. As we formed government, we did get an extension on that, and we're able to come up with the first part of our legislation, which was really focusing on how do we protect the most vulnerable in the situation, so that if there's mental health issues, if there's issues around family interference, that the people making decisions are making decisions in a way where they're able to work on their own behalf. Now, as the C-14 came forward, we also passed, as part of that legislation, 3 reviews. We've had 1 review last Parliament. Another review will be coming up in 2020. And as part of that review, we'll be looking at things like the decisions in Quebec. But this is a really complex moral and ethical problem for us to deal with as members of Parliament. We had a lot of midnight sittings, and you can check out openparliament.ca and see what my discussion was in terms of my mother's passing and how I tried to incorporate that into my thinking, as well as working with Hospice Wellington and with my priest, and actually Cardinal Collins helped us with this as well, the Catholic members in our caucus. And we will be reviewing it in 2020.
So according to Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Canadians should have access to medical assistance in dying. As a person of faith and someone who's worshipped in many different congregations, I think it's really important that we respect different people's desires, their own understanding of, and their own belief system in what they see fit for themselves. In terms of this this question, this person in Quebec who's sued that she should have access to medical assistance in dying, even though she doesn't have some terminal diagnosis. What I think is we as a country we really failed to provide really good mental health services to people. I think right here in Guelph, people wait far too long to receive assistance from mental health services. There's no wait time requirements. We have wait time requirements for getting a knee replacement, but if you're actually thinking about taking your own life, you're left to your own devices. I think your government has actually failed to be compassionate and thoughtful in this, and we need to provide more funding for mental health services.
Yeah, the government's going to tell you who should live and who should die. They want assisted suicide, so we're into eugenics again. So if you're getting older and, you know, what's the sense in paying for you to keep you alive? You're no good to society. As a matter of fact, the Liberals have been discussing in Ottawa that they're going to allow children, just like a children can make their own identity and tell their parents who they are, and it just got ruled out west that yes, if there was a man that wanted to call his son his daughter, wouldn't call her a boy, and they took him to court and wouldn't let him out of jail till he agreed to cooperate. So now they're going to pass this law where the child can go to the doctors without the parents' permission. You'll get a phone call say, yeah, your child was really depressed, and you can pick it up at the morgue. That's where this thing is going. People, I'm telling you, do not fall for this abortion scheme. Okay? And men that are saying it's a woman's choice, how can you say that when a woman is saying it's my uterus and they're talking for themselves? How can a man say something for a woman either way? It's in God's hands, not man's hands.
Please continue.
Sir, okay. The Liberal government, as stated by my Conservative colleague here, didn't follow through with the $3 billion palliative care package that they promised in 2015. And I think that it is interesting and concerning. That's wrong. Well, okay, you can address it during your time. I think it's concerning when we've got people who are potentially not in their correct minds going and looking at killing themselves with a doctor assist when they're not chronically ill. So I would be very hesitant to expand something like that in Canada. As far as I'm concerned personally, and I don't believe that the People's Party has a position on this officially, but me personally, I don't think it's a good idea. So, thank you.
Regarding euthanasia and assisted suicide, the Conservative Party's priority is to ensure that the legislation permitting euthanasia and assisted suicide includes safeguards for the most vulnerable in our society, as well the conscience rights of physicians and allied health professionals. The legislation requires a parliamentary review of its provisions and of the state of palliative care in Canada to commence in 2021. So as an MP, I will be sure to listen to my constituents and all of you here and bring their concerns to Ottawa when it's reviewed in 2021.
Thank you.
Well, I've had some personal experience with assisted suicide. My sister in Holland committed euthanasia because she was suffering in terrible pain. She had bone cancer, and every day of her life was a misery. So, in the Netherlands, they have a very progressive euthanasia program. If you're of sound mind and the patient agrees that it's time to go to relieve the suffering, then I think that should be allowed, don't you? If you were suffering like that, don't you think you should, have a decision, that you have the right to make a decision to leave this earth in peace and without pain?
The writing is on the wall. We have abortion. We now have euthanasia. We all think, well, it's all under limited circumstances. We just talked about Holland. Apparently seniors in Holland are afraid to go to the hospital because their doctor could go on holiday and the doctor that replaced them could decide it's time for euthanasia for this person. So, at what point will this be where somebody will say, well, people are too old, they're too frail, or it's costing too much money, or whatever the problem is? Who knows when that's going to be? But the writing's on the wall.
Thank you. So we move on to the next question. If elected, what will you or your party do to support the conscience rights of healthcare practitioners?
I think this is a really important question. If you're a medical doctor or a nurse practitioner and you are being asked to do something that you're not comfortable with, I think it's really important that you have the right to say you need to seek another person to be of service to you.
Well, once again, I go back in time. I always go back in time because I don't like hearing somebody say, oh, wow, you know, we're doing pretty good here compared to this country, compared to that country. I've always believed this country is blessed by God and that we did not lack anything, period. So back in the olden days, you know what they used to do? Doctors used to only get paid when their patients were healthy. How do you like that one?
So currently, as it stands, we being Canada, spend about $300,000 to $500,000 a year sending late-term abortions to the United States from Quebec. These are babies that are past 27 weeks before 36 weeks or before birth, I guess 40 weeks. And so that happens regularly every year in Canada, which is incredible. I learned this last year, which is something I was talking about earlier. And so, conscience rights of healthcare practitioners. Yes, I think they should have a choice, but I don't think that we should be sending people to other countries to follow through with late-term abortions. I think that we should be seriously looking at some of the practices that are taken for granted in this country.
Thank you.
I'm not a human doctor, but I'm a veterinary doctor. But I can relate. When we take the oath that to do no harm. And I think as far as euthanasia and assisted suicide is concerned, the Conservative Party will be very, very careful in safeguarding the conscience rights of physicians and health professionals. And I think I'm very personally related to this cause as a veterinary doctor, and we do face, I faced difficult choices in my life as well as when I was practicing back in India, when you have to put down patients like dogs and cats, but I think I can relate to that feeling. So I think the conscience rights are very, very important to doctors, and we have to safeguard them.
I think becoming a healthcare worker, being conscious of who you're going to be dealing with is part of the job. So I think healthcare workers should be prepared. If they take on that responsibility and that profession, that they should be prepared to offer a choice to someone who's in great pain and request euthanasia.
Healthcare workers take on their role because they want to help people. By and large, they didn't come to terminate lives. So if you have a physician that knows that a patient is lonely and isolated, they haven't been visited much, sure, they have some illness perhaps, but there isn't really that much wrong with them. So forcing such a doctor to order euthanasia for a patient is just wrong. And the Christian Heritage Party is totally opposed to that. Doctors should have conscience rights. There's lots of doctors out there who will do whatever you want. But I don't think that you should put on every doctor's conscience the fact that, well, I had this patient for 20 years, and then I was forced to eliminate them.
So very clearly in the preamble of the bill that was passed by Parliament, I'm going to read this. The Government of Canada is committed to developing non-legislative measures that will respect the personal convictions of the healthcare providers. The practitioners will have the right to choose as their conscience dictates. So that was one of the fundamental principles of the bill. And when the Supreme Court said you have to come up with legislation to allow people to make the choice to end their lives, we have 77,000 physicians in Canada that had to somehow respect the law of the Supreme, as the Supreme Court of Canada was putting out, the 360,000 nurses. So we needed a bill to put a framework to this, that people that are minors, people that have addiction or mental health issues had to be included in the bill. And also the practitioners had to be included who have given an oath that they will protect life. But yet, when people need to have a way to end their life, that it's done in a way that respects the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So that was the difficulty we had as members of Parliament. And our duty as members of Parliament is to protect the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but to do that in a way that will protect the most vulnerable, which in this case are the people that are suffering.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question, which will begin with Immaculate, I believe. How will you achieve a global approach to combating carbon emissions, knowing that a global approach is much more effective than taking small steps, such as a carbon tax that won't move the people, but rather hurt the economy?
Thank you.
By the way, before you begin, we only have one more question after this.
Well, first of all, I don't believe in a global approach. You know what? We have a great country here, Canada. And when Diefenbaker was the Prime Minister of this country, our money was worth 5% more than the American money, and we weren't deficient in anything. I know people will tell you, oh, the world's changed today. Sure, it's changed. We have pluralism here in culture, but don't accept pluralism in religion. Once again, we don't need global interests. We've got to look after ourselves right here at home. If we look after ourselves here at home and keep our country upright and living by the laws of God. You want to see the laws change? By the way, what's going to happen? They're going to usher in Sharia law is what's going to be ushered in. And if you think I'm hard on what I'm saying about abortion or what I'm saying about homosexuals, I love them. But guess what? When this conglomerate ushers in these new laws, the homosexuals will be stoned to death by Sharia laws, and when a woman gets raped, she'll go to jail for getting raped. That's the way those laws read. So I don't know why you people want anything to change. Why do you want to change? We've got a beautiful country here. Forget about all this stuff they're trying to ram down our throats. I'm not here because I want to be here. I don't really need to be here, but I got to give you a warning. Please, take a look at your parties. Go into them deep. I'm not here to rail them, but I've studied them all deep, and I know where we're all going. And they're all in concert.
Thank you very much.
What works in British Columbia won't necessarily work in Calgary. What works in Calgary won't necessarily work in Halifax. What works in Toronto won't work necessarily in St. John's. A global approach for fighting climate change or CO2 emissions, specifically the Paris Accord, allows China to continue building coal plants unencumbered for the next 15 years. So that seems weird to me. It seems like a money transfer. A carbon tax doesn't reduce emissions. The one job it's supposed to do, it doesn't do. And I can prove that by showing you the comparison between BC and Ontario, or BC and pretty much any other province in Canada without a carbon tax. So I think that local is the way to do it. I think that having each community decide on what their process will be, or provincially, will be much better than having a one-size-fits-all that doesn't actually do anything except make things more expensive for Canadians solution. It doesn't make sense to me to implement something that doesn't work at the stated goal, the carbon tax, And it doesn't make sense in my world to have the federal government say, we're not going to implement anything, but you have to implement this. I think that it is up to the provinces
10 seconds, please.
to implement their solution that will work in their province, just like BC has done, and the constituents in that province to hold their provincial government accountable without the escape hatch of them saying, it's the feds. We have a responsibility and government should function properly at their own levels. Thank you.
So, I'm a toxicologist, I'm a scientist who works for a clean technology company. I'm involved with toxicological sciences for more than 20 years. And I do believe in the power of science. I feel in the whole discussion of taking care of the environment, we are acting as if science has nothing to do. And I don't believe in taxes, and I do believe that we must bring Canadian creativity and innovation to the world, and also take our climate fight globally. I think there are countries which need our attention, and we should be a superpower in technological innovations as far as our solutions to the problem of climate change are concerned. And we have to focus in countries which are really polluting, like China, and so that's where I stand.
Thank you.
Well, the global approach to keeping carbon's emissions from entering the air is to keep the stuff in the ground. That means we're going to have to take on the fossil fuel capitalism, and that will require a global plan. One way is a transitional program from what we currently have to a mass public transit system that runs more on electricity, for example, rather than build a lot of electric cars. The solution basically is affordable, widespread, mass public transit. Let's see, what else did I write down here? Yeah, so basically, keep the stuff in the ground. That should be the world plan. Thank you.
It's too bad that we don't have hydrogen technology available for vehicles on a widespread scale now. But, and we can't really, as I foresee it, do everything worldwide. It would just be too costly or too invasive. However, in Canada, we have carbon capture enterprises, one of which removes a ton of carbon, a metric ton, for about $200 US. And then there's another one that the Quest and ACTL together, organizations, are expected to capture 2.7 metric tons of carbon a year, or the equivalent of emissions of 600,000 cars. Well, of course, there's a cost to that as well. People don't want to give up their cars, so here's an opportunity for the carbon to be removed from the air, and then it can be used potentially for something else.
Thank you. I think the premise of the question is wrong. That it's been proven by Nobel scientists, by Nobel economists, by the United Nations panel on climate change, that pricing pollution actually does work in reducing emissions. It isn't a partisan thing. It isn't one party fighting against another. We need to be fighting climate change together. And when world economists are saying that the system in Canada is one worth looking at by all other countries, it is a global approach by using economics to fight climate change. We have a document, Clean Canada, Protecting the Environment and Growing Our Economy, that has a 50-point approach to fighting climate change. 1 point is putting a price on pollution across Canada. And for provinces that don't want to participate, we'll help you with that. So that we will return checks to individuals and to businesses, 8 out of 10 Canadians will get more back at tax time than they pay out in carbon, but it's changing their behavior so that when they're filling their tank, they might think of using a different type of vehicle, or they might combine
10
travel.
seconds.
So pricing pollution does work. It's been proven around the world. Canada has a leading approach that now other countries are looking at. So we should be proud of what the federal government, the Liberal government, has done to lead the fight on climate change.
Thank you.
When the Pope talked about the brutal act of injustice towards the poor and future generations if we did not reduce their carbon emissions, he actually had a bunch of corporate oil executives in the room. And the corporate oil executives responded and said, if you would price carbon, this is how we can actually move this forward. It's really important that we do price carbon. We need to price carbon pollution. And in response to Mark's saying that it's not working in BC, between 2007 and 2017, the economy in BC grew by 27%. They delinked their carbon emissions from their growing economy. It's really possible. China is the world leader in renewable energy. They don't want our Alberta bitumen because they've got lower cost, better solutions. Canada is going to be left behind if we do not turn quickly to clean energy solutions, providing zero interest loans for homes and businesses to do the right thing. People want to do the right thing, and we need to provide the right business environment so that we can do the right thing without creating government debt. I'm very proud to be part of the Citizens Climate Lobby. I went to Ottawa, I met with Frank Valeria, and I educated parliamentarians about carbon pricing. The Liberal government is giving the largest carbon checks to the largest corporate carbon emitters, and that is wrong.
Thank you.
What's that?
Mark, if you could pass it to Mark.
Oh, it's my turn. Thank you.
Okay, so the last question this evening, before we ask our candidates to sum up their position based on what they have learned tonight, the question is, how will your party make government responsible to the people you serve or legally accountable for promises?
Fair enough. My party has a pledge. Dalton McGuinty signed a pledge in 2000, I think it was 2003, and I was very excited about this pledge. He signed no new taxes. And I said, he's gonna do it. And then 3 months later, this was my very first job, so I remember this very distinctly. The taxes went up by $70 for healthcare. And I said, he signed the pledge. He signed the pledge. The pledge meant nothing, right? Which is unfortunate. And so I feel a little deficient in saying, I'm going to sign a pledge. But that's the best we've got, because promises get made a lot by politicians. And sometimes the promises are not possible. Sometimes they're wildly optimistic. Sometimes they think they're possible, the politicians making the promise. And so I will say to you, I think my platform and the People's Party platform is a realistic platform. And I've met Mr. Bernier and I've talked with him. And I've spent some time with him one-on-one. And he seems as genuine in person that he believes his platform is achievable. And within the first 4 years, we're putting forward a platform that is not 5 years to balance the books, it's 2, which is different than the Conservatives and the Liberals. They're saying 5. We're putting forward a platform where we will achieve real markers within the 4 years.
10 seconds, please.
Markers like reducing your taxes, balancing the budget. And if not, please don't vote for us again. But this time, give us a shot. Thank you.
Thank you.
The government should work for the people, absolutely, and I think it's extremely important in democracy that whatever leaders promise, they should deliver. We all know under the Liberal government, the sunny ways and budgets will balance themselves. We are seeing what is happening to that aspect of it. So I think one of the ways to keep government in check is to remove them if they don't follow on promises. So that's all I can say for now.
to make government accountable, there should be a recall mechanism whereby, you know, say Justin Trudeau lies about proportional representation, or Stephen Harper, the way he lied, or how about Mr. Chrétien? Remember, he was going to rip up the NAFTA agreement? Well, he never did. So there should be a recall mechanism that the public can initiate in order that these parliamentary liars are then, you know, dragged over the carpet, and if it needs to happen, a new election will be called. Certainly when it comes to Parliament, the power of the big party leaders has to be eliminated. There can't possibly be any, you know, decent accountability when the leadership is deaf to the public and only listens to big corporate interests. You know, the ones that fly Justin Trudeau and Mr. Scheer around in private airplanes. That sort of accountability is, you know, absent when it comes to listen to the public. And of course, you should elect more independents to the House of Commons. That's the only way you're really going to like sweep out
10 seconds, please.
the current unaccountability that the big parties are for you.
You can go to the Christian Heritage Party website, chp.ca, and see what we stand for. Where we're as accountable, I guess, as anyone else, but one thing we would like to do is draft legislation and put it out to people and say, this is what you want. And if it's not, then we would make changes. But we're a party of service. We're not here to say, no, you must do this, or you must do that, or here's new taxes, or whatever. We want to be serving the interests of all people.
In my 90 seconds, I'm going to try to outline Ottawa changes and Guelph changes. In the Ottawa changes, in our platform, we're proposing more private members' business to be debated and voted on in Parliament, to work with Parliament to introduce new technology and institutional changes to better connect members with their constituents, to eliminate the use of the whip and party list to give the Speaker greater freedom to call on members of Parliament when they want to speak, and providing more resources for our committees so that we have the staff to research ideas from our communities. In Guelph, my wife Barb had a wonderful idea when I was elected. She said, I go to the mosques, I go to the Gurdwara, but I don't go to the other Christian churches. And I said, well, you know, I go to Holy Rosary 9 o'clock every Sunday, and yeah, I sit in the same pew. But she said, there's a lot of churches and a lot of faith groups out there. And so I have a schedule with 40 churches on it that I visit after Mass every Sunday. And that makes me accountable to the people, because I'm there. I'm listening to what they're talking about. They're asking me questions about what I'm doing in Ottawa. I've also held 12 town halls since I was elected. Town halls on things from food security to housing to mental health, to hear from my constituents. So when I go back to Ottawa, I can say, this is what they're telling me. And that's accountability.
10 seconds, please.
And we do 4 mailings a year to every house in Guelph to say, this is what I'm working on. Here's a tear-off. Tell me whether I'm working on the right things. What's your priority? And I'll take that forward to the House. So that's what it's about, grassroots and working between Ottawa and Guelph. And I'm loving it.
Thank you very much.
Our Prime Minister's office is so vulnerable to being the target of big money and big business. What we see again and again is policy is driven from corporate interests and passed through the parliamentary office to the parliamentary secretaries, down through the parliamentary committees. And if you say the wrong thing, if you vote the wrong way on the parliamentary committee, you get kicked off. They actually choose people on those committees who are able, who they can coerce, who they can force to do the Prime Minister's will. It's really undermining the ability of our Parliament to actually function. What we need is a minority government where we have the decisions being made in the sunlight of our democracy. We can't allow decisions to be made by corporate interests any longer. I'm very proud of the Green Party policy that the Liberal government brought in this process of election promises to be audited by the Parliamentary Budget Office. They failed to engage transparently with that process. The Green Party has brought forward 23 of our promises, that we will balance the budget in 5 years, that we will, number one, have a plan. We're showing how we're actually paying for our initiatives, and that we can actually follow through. It really makes sense that people are very disappointed in a government because they actually don't have a plan.
Thank you. Are we ready? Well, the first question I would ask is, what are we paying taxes for? I don't understand. I thought that the reason why we paid taxes was to have our services provided for us. I don't know, why are we funding all these different organizations and all these different charities? The government used to look after that with our tax dollars. But anyways, what I would do is I can only make you one promise. Only one. I would promise you that there'll be no more sneak attacks. There'll be no more of these laws passed December the 25th or when we don't know about them. And everything that ever comes up, I'll make sure that you hear about it. That's all I can promise you. And if you think I got under your skin tonight, won't you like a guy like that talking to them in Ottawa?
Thank you very much. Before the candidates sum up what they have learned tonight and what they wish us to learn, I'd like to give a personal thank you to them all for being so respectful and making my job so easy. And I'd like to thank you all also for the questions and for the attention that you've paid. Okay. Just sum up what you wish.
Thank you again to the organizers of this debate, and thank you to the other candidates who are present here today. As we approach Election Day, we also approach Remembrance Day and the sacrifices that were made for us to be a free society with open and fair elections. We must all honor those sacrifices. We recognize that the Liberal government Canadians elected in 2015 proved to be very different than what it was advertised to be. Justin Trudeau is not the voice of golf and does not reflect the character of golf. And golf should reject the re-election of Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government. We must reject Liberal carbon tax scheme and choose a better way, one that also makes everyday living more affordable. It is about approaching issues by trusting and supporting Canadians to make their own good decisions, such as on how to reduce their carbon footprint and not how to just tax them more. And we must bring our Canadian creativity and innovation to the world, and we must encourage consumer and market-driven solutions for our businesses, both big and small. We are blessed and we cherish the opportunities and freedoms we all have as Canadians. The world needs more Canada. May we all strive for a better Canada so that it remains a beacon of hope for all of humanity. Thank you again to all who are here tonight for this opportunity. It will be a privilege to represent you as your next Member of Parliament in Ottawa. Come Election Day, please vote Ashish Sachan.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm running as an independent to primarily encourage you to change your voting behavior. Let me just read to you what I've written here on my final paragraph of my overall platform. I suggest that you stop wasting your support for mainstream parties that lie and peddle in phony promises. As an independent, I do not wear a straitjacket made out of party dogma. I am not told what to do or say by centralized leadership from Ottawa. Such undemocratic restraints do not exist for an independent. He is free to speak his mind, state his position, and, as a socialist, is more a candidate of the people, a commoner or worker who stands outside the traditional democratic process. It's called the House of Commons for a very good reason, not the House to be controlled, abused, and marginalized by big political parties. A vote cast for me would indicate that you are well on your way to supporting real democratic change in Canada.
Thank you.
In Canada, for the first time, we have more people who are 65 years of age and older than we do 14 years of age and younger. And I'm really concerned for the young. As we get more and more federal debt, it's not going to be us, for the most part, that worries about it. It's not going to be people 50 years of age and older. No, we're going to enjoy all the luxuries or whatever we get from the debt. But the Christian Heritage Party has a plan to pay it off like a mortgage so that after 25 years, you wouldn't have any debt. Because it's not fair to rob from our children and grandchildren. And yes, we have concerns for carbon, but we have to work within the constraints of what people want. Not very many people in this room would say, oh, I'm going to get an electric vehicle tomorrow. And even then, how is the electricity made that powers that vehicle? There can be carbon sources for that too. And of course, the life issue where we have hundreds of thousands of women who are troubled by having had an abortion. I mean, it's not like they're tin soldiers and go out there and, oh,
Seconds, please.
nothing happens. So we need to partner with them to help find counseling for them. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an interesting night. And I appreciate you being with us as we discuss things. As Paul set things up at the beginning, it was going to be a question and answer, and your questions coming in writing and our answers going back to you. It did go sideways a lot. I was focused on a lot, but you'll notice I didn't return fire. I'm focused on you. I want to create the best country that we can have together. I want us to be the best city and the best country in the world. And I can't do that by fighting political partisan interests. I need to focus on your ideas. How do we create a better world for our grandchildren? How do we make sure that our Indigenous people are treated fairly and justly, and that they have access to clean water and food security, mental health services? And I've traveled across Canada to First Nations community as a water champion, bringing solutions to First Nations, but really getting solutions from First Nations so that they could tell me, their elders would say what they need in their community, and I'd bring that back to the minister, and we'd work on solutions with Indigenous people, not taking something from Ottawa and putting it on top of them. And that's what working together is about. If we can do well with our First Nations brothers and sisters, and with refugees that have come to Guelph that need to be integrated and accepted into our community, we can surely do better amongst ourselves in this room. So thank you for the opportunity to meet with you tonight and to answer your questions. I look forward to serving you in the next 4 years. Inshallah.
To me, it's really unfortunate that Aisha was not here today. I think having more women involved in politics would do us very well. I know many of us share the concern that we need to take decisive action to address our climate emergency. We simply have not done enough to protect the earth and our children's future. We can no longer fail to act from justice and from love. Our economy has left so many of us behind. Poverty is still a reality for many in our society, and this is unacceptable. As we address the climate crisis and transition to a low-carbon economy, we need to ensure no one is left behind. We've had our plan audited and will balance the budget in 5 years. We know we can afford universal pharmacare, dental care, and child care. Generational justice requires we are fiscally responsible and that we address the climate emergency and leave no one behind. The path our government is on is not fair. They're not going to balance the budget. Greta Thunberg and the climate strikers of the world are calling us to account. The earth is their inheritance. Just a handful of Greens elected can hold the balance of responsibility to hold the government to account.
10 seconds, please.
And Guelph has a special role to play in this. I hope I can earn your trust and your vote, and that I can take care of your representation for the next 4 years.
Well, after hearing everything tonight, it's quite clear. It's not a climate change we need. It's a heart change. It's a heart change. You know, and I encourage you not to vote God out of this country. You know, this country has never had a war in it. Here, we've never been invaded here at home. God gave us a wall called the sea, the ocean. The only way people can get here if we invite them here. And we've been compassionate. We love everybody in the world, and we've helped everybody in the world. Matter of fact, they say Canadians are too soft. But, you know, the problem is sin. He's not on the cross anymore. He paid the debt for all of us, for our sins, no matter what your sin is. He said there's salvation for all. So I just wanted to share a little story with you, a true story. There was this guy who's coming home from high school, getting ready to go to university. And they were all cleaning out their lockers in school. And this one kid, he was carrying, his hands were full of books. And he was walking along the sidewalk. And he dropped his books. And they fell on the ground. And there was another young student behind him. And he stopped over and he said, "Can I help you?"
10 seconds, please.
And he helped him pick up these books. And then he helped them home. And then they ended up in university together. And then when graduate time came, the one fellow that took the podium said about his friend, he said, "I was on my way home to commit suicide. And Jim there stopped me to help pick up my books. He became a friend." And that's a true story. So I encourage you to help each other.
Thank you. The cost of living is skyrocketing, going out of control. Housing costs skyrocketing as well. Seniors on a fixed income can't afford electricity and rent at the same time. Fentanyl is rampant and killing 12,800 people since 2016. The youths who aren't being involved in the fentanyl crisis can't find a job that will allow them to afford to purchase a house. And so they're not having kids at the same rate. They're bombarded with material telling them not to have children, either because the planet is dying or for other various reasons. So they don't understand the joy and the value of children. I've got friends, most of whom didn't have kids. I have 2, and they don't understand how much joy my kids bring into my life. Why can't we use Canada's wealth to encourage Canadians to have babies instead of burying them in tax debt? Why can't we promote a culture of life in Canada and community and growth around families, rather than individuals who are siloed, living in tiny little boxes within a city? It seems insane. My family, we
10
live
seconds, please.
We live next door to each other, so we're very close. And I can't believe other people get through without that support. A PPC government will start solving these problems at the root instead of increasing taxes and bureaucracy. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to everybody. And before we go on our way, I would like to ask Father Ian if he would mind just giving us all a farewell blessing.
We'd like to thank you as well for the commentary.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Vote a round of applause for Jackie and Paul, who've done a wonderful job. Thank you, all of you, for coming out. And gentlemen, thank you very, very much for taking part this evening. Protect us, Lord, as we stay awake. Watch over us as we sleep. That awake we may keep watch with Christ, and asleep rest in his peace. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And the blessing of Almighty God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit descend upon you and remain among you always. Amen. Safe home, everyone.
That was fun. Good job. Well done. As always. As always. Yeah, that was fun, man. Good job.
Yeah, good job. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you. So when you're next time in Guelph, give my phone calls.
I will.